Hey guys, Robbie here from CrossFit South Bend. Today we're going to talk about nutritional studies. If you're like most people, this can definitely be one of the more frustrating aspects of trying to figure out what to eat, is that every day there's something new on the news, and it doesn't help that the news sensationalizes conclusions that scientists try to keep, relatively conservative and says, oh my God, red meat will kill you, and having a beer a day will save your heart. But then the next day, having a beer a day will kill you. And eggs are good, eggs are not good. Chocolate's good, chocolate's not good. Caffeine's good, caffeine's not good. So how do you navigate this landscape? How do you sift out relevant information that could be useful to you when it comes to nutritional studies from stuff that is fluff and stuff that is just essentially being sensationalized by the news media and things of that nature? So let's start with some basics. There's a whole bunch of different nuances to this topic. There are all different sorts of studies. There are epidemiological studies. There are randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. There are meta-analyses of different studies looking at multiple different studies. But what I want to talk to you today about is the distinction between two different types of studies and what they can show, and even more importantly, what they cannot show. This is so incredibly important to understand. So, number one, let's talk about epidemiological studies. These are population-based studies, typically where they're looking at what a larger population is eating. Sometimes it will involve surveying a number of people where they'll ask them, what have you eaten over the past year? What do you generally tend to eat? And then they'll ask them about associated health conditions that they might have. So let's start out with some important things to point out about these types of studies, which, by the way, comprise a whole ton of different studies that you see touted out there saying, this thing's good and this thing's bad. So it's really important to understand, are these good studies or not? And what can they really show and what can they not show? So the number one most important thing to remember about these types of studies is that they cannot show causation. They cannot show that one thing is causing another. So let's say you do a food recall survey with, 10,000 participants, 1,000 participants, make it anything you want. And it says, okay, well, we see on the surveys that this person who circled red meat that they consume a lot also tends to have cancer or heart disease or what have you. Well, it could very well be the case that red meat and cancer are in fact correlated. That could be true, but that study can't show it. All it can show is that those two variables are connected with one another. A way to put this is that they are correlated, but we don't know yet whether they cause each other. Here's a famous example. We know that ice cream sales and shark attacks are very strongly correlated with one another. But do ice cream sales cause shark attacks? Well, no, of course not. What they have in common is the summer, right? So with these epidemiological studies, you can sometimes get this sense from the news media that one thing is causing the other, but all that a study could ever show is that these two variables are correlated. You don't know yet in what way they are connected. You don't know if they're causing one another. Another issue with these types of studies is what's called the healthy user bias. This is where people who tend to have health issues tend to overemphasize what they think of as unhealthy activities to kind of justify the fact that they're sick. So they might overemphasize the fact that they smoke or eat, meat which is conventionally thought of as bad, or don't exercise. And then people who are healthy tend to overemphasize, drinking water, eating veggies. They'll tend to over-exaggerate the things that they do in connection with their good health, which leads to another important caveat with these types of studies. When it comes to these types of studies, you're asking people to recall what they've eaten over a very long period of time. I can tell you, having worked with a number of people who do food journals, it's hard enough to keep track of what you've done over the past week and couple of days, let alone over the past year. So people often just guess at what they have eaten over the past year, and it doesn't always correlate. In fact, very often it does not correlate at all with the truth of the matter of what they actually ate. They just kind of selectively remember the things that they ate. So anytime you see a study in the news or on TV where they say that, more than 1,000 people took place, it's almost certainly an epidemiological study. And while these things are useful for finding out, in the first place, should we investigate whether one thing is causing another, they cannot tell you whether one thing is causing another. They just can't tell that. So you could have the best designed, epidemiological study in the world and could confirm everything you believe about nutrition, but it wouldn't be the right thing to say, well, this definitively shows that, because all it can show is a link between two variables. It can't show causation. But that being said, one thing an epidemiological study can show is that there isn't a connection between two variables. So that is very important. So sometimes with these surveys of people, you can actually see that one variable that you thought was linked with another variable, like red meat and cancer, let's say, or smoking and autoimmune disease, that the two aren't linked. So that can be useful as well. So that when it says that two variables aren't linked, that's good, and that's an important thing to know, and that's something an epidemiological study can genuinely show. But when it says two variables are linked, that's an important thing to know, but it's not telling you yet whether one thing causes another. So anytime you see something where it says, 1,000 plus people were surveyed, or 10,000 plus people were surveyed, and chocolate's gonna kill you, or chocolate's gonna save your life, remember, it can't, strictly speaking, show that. All it can show is that these things are correlated with one another, okay? Option number two. Option number two is a randomized, controlled, double-blind placebo study where they take one group, let's say, and they have them do a set of things and act as a control group, and then they have another group do a set of things, and that's supposed to be the effective therapy. So they have one group of people who has a similar background, and they're just eating normal food, and then another group does, let's say, the autoimmune paleo diet. Now, this type of study can actually show causation. This can show that one thing causes another. It can show that autoimmune paleo is really good at alleviating the symptoms and inflammatory markers of Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, and they've actually had studies published recently that show exactly this. The problem with this study, this type of study, is not so much a problem with the study itself, but getting it done in the first place. These things cost a lot of money, and most of this type of research is funded by pharmaceutical companies, and pharmaceutical companies have a vested interest in funding studies about drugs, not food. The second thing to say is with these randomized controlled trials, you have to keep people in a metabolic ward where they are essentially restricted from going out. You have to selectively feed them. And it's just this very artificial environment, which even if you could get people to sign up to do that for a long period of time, it's hard to control all the relevant variables, and that's not very much like their life. Even if you do it outside of a metabolic ward setting, then you do have these different issues of, what sort of environment is this person in, what sort of genetics. So you can try to control for all these different variables, but at the end of the day, it's a harder thing to do rather than not. So there are pluses and minuses to each of these different types of studies, and they're both important, but the important thing to remember is that they can only show so much. They can only show so much, and when you see these types of sensationalistic things in blog articles or newspapers or on the TV saying, chocolate's gonna kill you or red meat's gonna kill you, look at how many participants are in the study and look at, were they asking via a dietary survey of what these people remembered over the past 6 months to a year. If they were, then while it's important what conclusions they draw from that study, really it doesn't tell you anything in terms of causation. That study is just useful to then go on and do a further study that would be a randomized controlled trial that would tell you, are these two things like meat and cancer actually linked or not? It can't tell you that just by doing these dietary surveys. So, again, this can be something that you use when you look at these various types of studies to determine which ones actually tell you what, and do they provide useful information or not. All right, so just wanted to give you a sense of these two different types of nutritional studies and the limitations of each, and why you should always be wary of stuff where, some new study is telling you that some type of real whole food is problematic for you. If they're telling you that, you should be very skeptical of that claim. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.